I like your point about not painting everything in a dystopian, super negative picture, trying to provide a solution or provide a narrative that can be really positive. Like, the examples of the the different Australians with different backgrounds that you highlight in all of your posters, because I think one of the things that I think is a real juxtaposition is the fact that I think racism carries itself on through the narrative a lot of the time when it shouldn't have to, or when I wish it wouldn't. For example, blackface, which is obviously, blackface is extremely racist. But I remember an example of, and I'm interested in your thoughts, but I remember an example of there was a kid in Frankston. You mentioned you were going to Frankston later on today.
Yeah.
So this kid was from Frankston. I have lots of family in Frankston. I played football in Frankston for a bit. I'm from further down the Mornington Peninsula, but Frankston's a pretty low socioeconomic area.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a kid who got, he was an 18-year-old kid playing local senior football, and he went to a rap and R&B night, and he dressed as Akon. So he just painted himself black. He went blackface effectively. And this kid was smashed from pillar to post. Herald Sun, he was all over, inherent racism, what's wrong with Australia, blah, blah, blah. All the news outlets and so on and so forth. And it came out, I thought it was rough anyway, because I didn't see that it didn't seem like it was meant to hurt anyone's feelings or that it was racist. But it came out 7 days later that the kid had never heard of blackface before. So it's the narrative is, and that, I just have such an issue with that. I mean, it has to get to a point, we have to understand our history, but we have to be forgiving enough in certain scenarios to not propagate
but the thing
more
is,
of the us versus them. What do you think?
But if we forgive those people, then it's only by just crushing them that we can destroy racism forever. Like that's kind of what motivates those massive pylons, is that we found. What's really going on there is that all these people that know deep down in their hearts that they are also imperfect. They see someone else just flagrantly being ignorant and, dressing up in blackface or doing something which can be construed as offensive. All these other people get this chance to go, right, let's take it all out on them. It's kind of, they're raging against their own imperfectibility, really.
Yeah.
And the world's always been like that. We're not going to be we can't sort of stop it from happening, but I just think it does seem like it's sort of getting worse in some ways. And obviously, the thing to say is that, it's the way the media's changed. Social media allows all these people to pile on at once. But, that desire for moral purity and to scapegoat someone else's stupid behaviour, that's always been with us. It's just that now you can jump on some kid for doing something stupid at a party, and the whole country can get into it.
It just seemed really sad to me,
No,
because this kid is now painted as a racist, and the narrative of us versus them is fired right up. It's on the front page of the Herald Sun, and Ricky Gervais has talked about it before, and I'm a big fan of Ricky Gervais, and I don't know why he brought it up or why it was on topic when he was asked a question, and he sits on the same side of the fence as me in this regard, where he's like, it's intent. If he's not intending to be...
And you can't measure intent. It's kind of...
At what
it's
point...
unquantifiable. It's sort of inside your own mind.
Yeah, that's right. At what point can we say, hey, we're all one person, and this guy's not trying to be racist to anyone for something that happened 100 years ago? Let's just go about our days and not worry about the racism part of this. Not bring up... I don't know. It is, but I understand the cultural significance of blackface. So it is a tough position. I remember with the kid in Frankston, Nick Natanui, West Coast Eagles player. So he's got dark skin. I remember he was asked about it, and he said, I used to absolutely love it when all the kids at the games would paint themselves black like me. And then once I realized about blackface, I just found that it was really sad that they hadn't been educated well enough in their... That was the quote that he came out with, and I was like, hang on a sec.
Yeah, how did that flip?
You didn't even know about it. Yeah. I just think it's like, I don't...
Well, it's not part of our culture, is it? It's an American thing
Yeah.
of minstrels
Yeah.
and so yeah, it's people try to
propagate. I
Yeah.
feel like they try and propagate racism. Not propagate it, but try and
I get what you're saying though. Yeah.
raise the, because it was in this particular instance there was no racist. Well, let's give the guy the benefit of the doubt. You know?
Yeah, well, hypothetically,
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at it two different ways. That maybe it was purely like those kids dressing up at the game that you mentioned just before. Maybe it was all just out of love. There was the intent was purely wanting to identify with somebody that they
Admired.
idolized. So there's that possibility. The other possibility is that it was just pure hatred, and that's the way that person expressed that. Both, and how can you possibly measure it or prove it either way? And so the solution culturally at the moment seems to be, well, we don't know, so let's just stop those things. And what that does is it creates this sort of cultural boundary and subordinates culture to politics. And we actually need culture in order to... that's what art can do, is show us that these political boundaries are ultimately not real, and that we are all humans, and that culture is a way of sort of communicating across political boundaries. And so the more we sort of take the power away from culture and say that, only people of color can make people of color culture, and white people can only make white people culture. As soon as you start thinking that way, culture becomes less powerful and less able to talk across the aisle or across the political boundary. So I don't know. I'm an artist, so I will always come down on the side of culture and its ability to transcend those boundaries.
Yeah.
And it's the artist's responsibility to try to find the cracks in the argument and to sort of to get over those boundaries. Because otherwise, if we can only make culture that's for the people that look like us, and they can only make their culture, if it comes down to that, we're fucked, because we can't communicate, we can't sort of show each other that we're human anymore. And yeah, I don't want to live in a world that's like that. So this is not me advocating for blackface. I'm just saying,
I can see the headlines tomorrow after the show's released. Peter Drew, racist. No,
but you got to find ways around it, and there are things which just become radioactive and fine. But the human imagination never gives up. It's so boundless that it will just find a way around, and that will just continue to happen. I don't really sort of I just think culture is so powerful that it will just keep finding ways of breaking the rules. And
no, for sure. And I think one of the interesting things is art seems to transcend culture and the cultural narrative that's being told. So for example, it's a lot harder for a politician or a public figure or a celebrity or a sports star or something to go out and draw a line in the sand and say, this is where I sit, and create a narrative, compared to an artist. And I mean an artist in the way that you do your art, or an artist as in, and I use this example because I'm just I've seen more of it, but comedians, for example, and musicians, but particularly comedians. Like, some of my favourite comedians are they're not quite political on one, like left or right, but kind of political satirists, I guess. Like George Carlin, for example. Like, if you watch George Carlin, are you familiar with George Carlin? Yeah. So George Carlin, I've only really watched all of his later stuff in his older years. White, balding, hair tied back, white beard, George Carlin. So, but he was a very vanilla comedian for when he was the first 20 years of his career, and then he became more of a political satirist, and people just absolutely loved it. But he was so smart, and he could break through the barriers, I guess, and tell the stories and show the ridiculousness of the way that we do things. Because realistically, we're so hypocritical, we're so we have so many oversights, we're so silly in what we do day to day. And I think it is the job of art, in whatever shape it is, whether it's with a brush, whether it's with a microphone, whether it's on stage telling jokes. I think it's a really important. It's like the jester at court, hundreds and thousands of years ago, or maybe they didn't have jesters thousands of years ago. But
it's the same thing, though. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. I think it's hugely important.
Yeah, because it's the person that stands up and says the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah.
I love comedy, and it's funny, isn't it, how that form of person standing up on stage with a microphone, it seems to have become more powerful and interesting and crucial over the last 10, 15 years. It's, I don't know, that position is more needed because there's just so much noise, and there's something sort of so honest and real, because when you're standing on stage and just talking with a microphone, there's no hiding, it's sort of just one person and their thoughts. And yeah, the comedy that I like is the person that sort of tries to say the right thing and then goes and says the wrong thing, and sort of the two coexist.
Yeah.
And it's such a relief to people because everybody has those thoughts. They explore things they're not meant to in their mind. And until we sort of talk about that, you can't have that catharsis, because, otherwise you're just locked in your own head thinking, should I be thinking these things? And when you're not allowed to discuss that stuff, that's when, I don't know, I think that's when people start to, things become toxic, or, sometimes it's like just by getting it out, things evaporate and you don't need to think about it anymore.